sometimes need to be.
So it is more related to IP, or it is just more related to IP, or any other advantage, like for example, from you mentioned if you have to do it other way around, that you incorporate in the India and then go to the US.
Yeah.
So I would ask you the question in this way, that if I incorporate in India and go to US, so what are the impacts of it? Like what are the challenges that would be, or that?
Very good question. Very good question. If you incorporate in India and go to the US, what ends up happening is that the India company would be the one that would hold all the IP. If you're trying to build a global product, most likely it will happen that you will have to raise funding in the US.
Okay, right.
And if you're doing that, an investor does not want to invest in the entity that does not hold the IP.
Okay, okay.
So you would not be able to do it until you find a way to transfer that IP to the US company, because they want to own the company that has the IP. Okay. And as a result of that, it would just be better if you had the IP already in the US. So from an investment standpoint also, it just makes sense.
This is Vivek. And so besides the structuring, the logistics, is there overhead? Because you probably ran the company from India initially, I guess. And then at the right time, you shifted base and had some other key executives there.
Sure.
So is that true, or?
Yeah, there is overhead, but it's not a very large overhead. So like I said, it's about $6,000 to set up both the companies, the US company and the India company, with the right relationship. And then to keep your filings alive, to keep your tax filed in the US and everything else, considering the number of transactions is negligible when you're still building the product at that point in time, it's really not a big deal. Like, it wouldn't even be $1,000 a year. So it's not really a big problem to go ahead and keep that alive and keep that working while you do all of the critical work, and have it be ready when you are ready. So again, not a big overhead.
Great, thanks.
I had another question related to the same thing. That it's if we incorporate in US, so do you have to have an office there? In the sense, can you work from India and then incorporate?
You have to have an address there.
Okay.
Not an office. You have to have an address there, and the other requirement that's there is you have to have somebody who is a US taxpayer to be able to do that.
Okay.
So it could be anybody. It doesn't have to be somebody who actually has any shares in the company.
Mm-hmm.
You just need that for inheritance of your employee tax identification number.
Okay.
Because the way the US system works is that a tax ID can only be created in reference to another tax ID, so that you have a chain of events to track back to.
Okay.
So basically, if you have a board member, or if you have somebody who's going to help you as a consultant, and if they're willing to let you incorporate the company with their help, that's all you need.
Okay. So you need some connection to over there, who is sitting there.
True. And in our case, it was one of our to-be board members. So he wasn't a board member yet. So Nexus is the one that invested our first round of investment, and it was one of the gentlemen from Nexus that was the one that did that for us. So,
yeah, thanks.
In near future, do you see any competition to your product from open source community?
So that's the part that we were very cautious about. And here's a very critical thing that we did as part of the thesis behind the company. We chose to consciously make the product for multiple databases. So the first product that we launched was for the MySQL database. The second product that we launched for the SQL Server database. The third product we launched is for the Oracle database. Now, the way the open source industry works is that open source industry only likes to work and build products on top of existing open source platforms. And that's a very small fraction of the market in all, from a revenue standpoint. So a company couldn't possibly sustain itself over the long term in the presence of all of the open source competition that would come around if it was purely based on that. And considering we're essentially creating a new category of software, it would be unwise to go ahead and tie the entire destiny of the company to only the open source product. So what we're able to do as a result of that is, even though there are open source competitors in the MySQL domain for us, we're able to stay ahead of them because we're able to invest into product R&D from the revenue streams of 3 different databases rather than 1. And as a result of that, the features that we build for the MySQL community can be given to the Microsoft SQL Server community and vice versa. So all 3 databases at the end of the day are fairly similar in their approach. But the fact that you can go ahead and build it for 3 databases allows you to be far more competitive than if you're only building it for MySQL.
There are some competitors.
Only in the MySQL domain, yes. There are a few competitors. And when I say the word competitor, I use that very loosely. There isn't even one company in the world that does the core 4 things that we do. Not even one. There isn't one. Okay? So the core 4 things that we do, well, the first is database load balancing. The second is database caching. The third is automatic failover and cross-geo distribution for database traffic. And the fourth is analytics. There isn't even one company in the world that does all these 4, except for us. So from that standpoint, we're unique. There are companies that do only load balancing. There are companies that do only caching. So from that standpoint, yes, there are competitors, but I'm using that word very loosely because the capabilities that we have and how they come together, there isn't actually even one company in the world that does this other than us.
Look at the evolution of Apache, right?
Yeah.
We get a project actually. So that's how we are also, only one company was there, Apache, who started all these evolutions.
Yep.
But on that note, some companies are there who say we do all these things. The things that you said.
Yeah.
Automatic failover, high availability, right? Like these companies change, right? After some time, Cloudera comes, Autonomous comes over there.
Yeah.
So it means there are some possibilities that some product from open source community could be there.
And there already are, like I'm saying, there already are, and that's not a problem. There is always enough room in the market for open source to coexist with commercial software. And if you look at a lot of customers, they actually prefer commercial software to open source many times because they have somebody that they can grab a hold of, get support, and not only support, get the ability to actually be able to go ahead and say, hey, I need this one feature. I don't know how to get that built. I'm not smart enough to do that. Who's going to do it for me? So from that standpoint, there is still a massive need for commercial software to exist because quite a lot of times, a lot of customers aren't smart enough to be able to build those features and develop those features for themselves. It's not Facebook building software for the world and for themselves, right? It's anybody and everybody who needs this. This is not a technology which is a niche technology.
Hello, this is Jitendra here. Sorry. This is Jitendra here.
Could you stand, please?
Yeah. Sorry.
Thank you.
Hi. So you struck the right wavelength by saying that you have very strict requirements for HR with respect to technology-wise CPU timing requirements, and you have been very selective. My question is, how do you sell your company? You mentioned about your option plan.
Yep.
So how do you sell your company in this country to prospective employees?
Sure. So let me answer that question in 2 ways. The kind of people that would understand the value of joining a startup and being able to do unique work, what they need to understand that they'll be able to work with like-minded people. They'll be able to go ahead and learn something new. They'll be able to go ahead and work on something that is actually making a difference in the market. As long as you can go ahead and communicate those key tenets effectively to them, and you can communicate that while they are working at an organization such as ScaleArc, that they will be able to go ahead and grow personally, they should be able to see why they want to get into that. If they can't see why they want to get into that, a hard sell is not going to help you. You really don't want to go ahead and hire people who aren't startup oriented or aren't looking to join a startup, aren't open to joining a startup, because you will just have culture shock and you will just have rejection if they finally do end up at that company and they are hired because you've put high pressure on the recruitment chain and you want to hire anybody and everybody if they are just a talent fit, and you will get them on board no matter what happens. There's always going to be rejection. You can't really go ahead and oversell. You've got to communicate what your benefit